Welcome to Her Side of Campus, the show where ideas spark action and voices ignite change. I'm your host, Komal Iqbal, and today we're diving deep into a conversation that just might challenge the way you see the world. Our guest isn't just making waves, they're creating tides of change, reshaping the landscape for women everywhere. Today's guest is Sofia Mahmood MBE, founder and director of Empowering Minds Consultancy.
Hi, lovely to be here.
So, Sophia, I'd love for you to tell me a little bit about yourself.
So I'm the founder and director of Empowering Minds Consultancy, and I work in Bradford and I work across the district and across the country. I'm very passionate about making a change within communities and systems level.
And how did you start?
To be honest with you, I've always wanted to have a career in the sense of making a difference and helping people. So when I was younger, I was like, oh yeah, I want to join the police and so on. So I started studying to become a police officer. And then when I got to university, I met some young people. And when I met those young people and I looked at their community orders, because part of my placement was looking at community orders, and I wanted to understand behavior a little bit better. And when I started looking at those young people, I said to them, before looking at the case notes, I said to them, why don't you tell me why you're here? And they said to me, oh, it's okay, you're going to go back to your posh life. And I was like, no, because I started in McDonald's scrubbing tables and toilets, and I've actually worked hard to get to where I am.
Yeah.
And when I met those young boys, I realized that life wasn't as simple for young people as we assume it to be. And I realized when we looked at criminal behavior, it wasn't as clear cut as what people believed it to be.
Mm-hmm.
And meeting those young boys changed my life. And it made me realize that I actually wanted to help young people and make a difference in their lives. So I wanted to tackle gang culture, drugs and alcohol, sexual violence, child sexual exploitation. But at the same time, I wanted to raise awareness on equality and diversity. And so even though I'd met these young boys and I wanted to make a difference to young people, I knew that was something that I wanted to do. But I remember many years ago when I went into work into one of the communities, and I'd experienced racist comments, and I'd got called the P word and told to F off back to where I came from.
Wow.
And that's when I realized, as much as I want to help young people, I want to make a change to systems around race equality and racial justice. And I started teaching young people about race identity, discrimination, stereotypes, and those kind of subjects. At the same time, I was dealing with gang culture. I was dealing with knife crime, drugs, antisocial behavior. But I always worked in communities that were underclass communities. So for me, it all started off when I did my placement and when I was younger, I had this vision of becoming a police officer. Obviously, I started wearing a hijab, and at that time, there wasn't many police officers that wore the hijab. So I thought, okay, I'm going to look at a different career. And that's when I met these young people who really made me change my perspective on wanting to make a difference to young people within the community, as well as standing up for ethnically diverse people.
Yeah, that's amazing, honestly. Well, today we are going to be talking about women's roles in society and how there's a place for both men and women in society. So what is your take on the idea that there is a role for both men and women in society?
I think it's a really important subject, Gomala. I'm so glad that you're covering this subject matter, because as much as we have rights for women, we have rights for men as well. And I think it's really, really important that we look at society, that we raise our girls to value boys and our boys to value girls, and just to value anyone and respect anyone who, any individual. And I feel in today's society, we shouldn't elevate one and eradicate the other. We should look at is that everything has to be about women's rights. But one thing we have to be proud of was we have come far in women's rights. We have to look at, there have been sisters before us that have made those sacrifices to make those entity doors open those doors for women like ourselves. But that doesn't mean at the same time we don't value the men that have supported us along the way. And the reason why I say that is because there are some amazing men out there who genuinely provide, who genuinely educate their daughters, who genuinely push for their daughters to be educated and have careers, work with them to travel, empower them in different ways.
Yeah.
But sometimes we get into a culture of where we just focus on the negative and we must focus on the positive. So in today's society, we need to remember there's 100% roles for men within societies and as well as women. It's not let's elevate one and eradicate the other.
Yeah, and I do feel like it's a lot now because of the society and social media that it has become this way where we only value one gender over the other. And if there's a certain group that values maybe men over women, that becomes a problem and it starts a whole thing on social media and then everybody knows about it. I guess that's where the question has been raised, is because around us on social media, everything is influenced in such a way where people are seen different, and feminism is at its peak at the moment. Everybody's talking about being feminist, and I guess I wanted to know, like, how come you have this perspective over a lot of other people? Because I know that a lot of people just say, oh, men are bad and women are good, and that's it. It's seen as black and white rather than colourful. And so I wanted to know where is the idea of men and women are equal coming from on your side, I guess?
Yeah, thank you, Komal. Really interesting. So let's break that down. Men and women are equal. However, we still see disadvantages for females in certain areas, i.e. pay gaps, maternity rights, menopause, women that are sexual violence, domestic abuse. Women are outnumbered on those.
Yeah.
However, I feel the reason why I say positivity is because we're moving into a culture now where male suicide rates are going higher. Yeah. We're seeing a lot more men that are suffering from depression, and a lot more men that are going down the route of isolation. And what we have to look at is, what do the men still bring? Because men do still bring the provider, the protector, the giver, the empowerer. There are still men out there that do that. And what we have to look at is that it's not about saying that feminism should take over, because there's a real questioning around masculinity and emotional intelligence of men. And we have to give credit where it's due. There are amazing men out there who take care of their children, who provide for their families, who elevate women in senior positions, who support women to get into senior positions. And I'll just say that some of the men that I work with, I have so much respect for, because they genuinely value you as a woman. However, we still don't have an equal footing in the door in some areas.
Yeah.
And not in a number of areas. And I think that's where the concern is. But what you have to look at on that aspect is, as much as we're moving around the rights for women, and I'm talking from an ethnically diverse woman's perspective, when I look at that and I say that, okay, as an ethnically diverse woman, I'm profiled and stereotyped the moment someone's seen me. So they look at me, they think South Asian woman, hijabi, Muslim, etc., etc. Sometimes, sometimes I'm being questioned. Are you a receptionist? Are you working in the job centre? Yeah. And it just shows you, when people look at women, they assume that they would only be at a certain level, and that men would be in those leadership positions. So then what happens is, women want to fight and say that, we can be in those senior leadership positions. But when you do get into those senior leadership positions, then people start to question that, are you a career woman or are you a mother? Like, which one are you? And that's the two. And I think when it comes to the feminist ideology or feminist movement, our opinions on feminism, they vary on that. But I can only talk about my experience. And my experience is, I come from a household where I have an amazing father and amazing brothers who have never stopped me from growing.
Yeah.
They've always pushed me to evolve. My brothers have always been my backbone. My father has always given me the opportunities. And on top of that, I'm very, it's South Asian Heritage Month, and if we're talking about South Asian heritage, I'm talking about, let's celebrate the South Asian men out there that have elevated their daughters to get into these positions. Let's celebrate those men. And I think that's what's really important. And unfortunately, not every South Asian young female has the opportunity. And I hope that we are moving forward in society where young girls are getting those opportunities and they don't fall down the route of it's either one or the other.
Yeah, because I was just going to say, like, a lot of people now, they think that it's a choice between having a family or having a career, when in reality, there is room for both. But a lot of people don't understand that, because the social media now, it is either the woman is at home with their kids 24/7, or they're out working and then the dad is a stay-at-home dad. Why is it like that now?
I think what's really interesting in that scenario that you've just given is, so are you saying that the woman's working and the father is at home?
So it's like that's one of the only options. So it's either that, or the woman is looking after the kids and the father is at home,
Okay.
out working.
So that feeds into the whole thing of where does the finances come from as well. So if the woman, and I'll tell you why I say that, is because I did a review on an organization around masculinity, and the gentleman felt that it would be better for him to go part-time because the wife earned more money than him. And his colleagues actually counteracted that and said to him, oh, you're whipped because what are you talking about? Your wife should be looking after the kids. But I think and what you've got to realize is every household makes a decision on what's best for them. So we can't turn around and say as a society that why is the woman at home and why is the man at home, whichever way they choose for that to be, because they should be based on what those individuals choose. However, in society, it's seen if the woman does decide to stay at home and raise her children because she's nurturing, she wants to raise her children herself, she wants to be part of that life for them, then people would say she's oppressed in some areas, if that was a South Asian woman and so forth. But not really. I think that comes down to her femininity and how she wants to be. However, if a man decides then he wants to stay home and his wife earns a better wage and so on and so forth, that's between them two as a couple. But like I said to you, we're in an era now where we're having single parent backgrounds, single fathers, we're raising their kids on their own. Let's not forget that. As much as a single mother's raising their kids, and that's a high proportion to the single fathers, we've got blended families now, and that's a growth area that we can see. But I always think that as a society, we're quick to make judgments and opinions on individual households. But we should look at those women, how they want to live their lives. I'll give you an example. One board meeting I was sat in, and predominantly men, and I said to them, can you please hurry up, because I need to get home and cook. And they were shocked. Why would you be shocked? Because my femininity is still that I'm a woman. I look after a family. I cater to my parents, my siblings, and so on and so forth. So that doesn't eradicate my value in society. And I think now it's like, okay, earn your own money, have your own car, have your own house, and so on and so forth. Yes, I would encourage young girls to be independent, financially stable, and have something for themselves, because I feel that is so, so important. Just to have a level of education and knowledge, because tomorrow you don't know what the future holds. However, in that same process, we shouldn't eradicate the men and say there's no need for them. There's a massive need for men in society, in homes, and being present fathers as well. I think that's really, really important. So it's a debatable one, that was. And the reason why I probably have this thinking, Komal, is because I've seen many families. I've seen single parent backgrounds, dysfunction families, broken homes, single fathers, blended families, and so on. And I always feel that if you look at men and the presence that good men play within society, they're very healthy. However, we've got some men that are very toxic, very narcissistic, very controlling, very coercive, and so on. And unfortunately, that's an element of the society. That's not the whole society. So why can we not differentiate? And I realized then we need to raise our sons to value women, but we need to raise our daughters to value men and respect men, but have a level of confidence to be able to identify the good from the bad.
So there needs to be a balance between both women and men in society, whilst also making sure that the kids are brought up right. Do you think that education and the environment that children are growing up on is impacting the balance between men and women in society today?
And I've always said this, a home needs love and care. That can come from a mother, that can come from a father, that can come from a single mother, single father, or blended families. And I think that's all down to how we nurture. So if as human beings, if we're in a healthy mindset, then our kids are going to be in a healthy mindset. And sometimes it becomes very overwhelming for some mothers when they're raising their children and they don't have support from their spouses or their partners and so forth. So what we've got to look at is that has an impact then on the kids.
Yeah.
If the mother is exhausted, the father's exhausted, or they're both working, kids are coming home to no meal, they're just having to get a takeaway and so on and so forth. What kind of environment are we creating in there? And I think that a lot of parents are trying, but they're up against a society that's a digital world now.
Yeah.
So what you've got now is, because attention span is so low, what parents feel is, oh, do you know what? We'll give them an iPad. It'll just make them quiet. But how do we sit and have conversations with our children?
Yeah.
But then if your mental health's not in a good place and you're a mother or a father, how are you going to sit and have a conversation with your children, whether that be a toddler or a young teenager? And I just think to myself that if parents are in healthy mindsets, kids are going to be in healthy mindsets as well. But then you see many, many individuals who sacrifice their own well-being to raise their children, and give their children everything that they want. However, then it doesn't still be enough for children. And I feel like, a child needs love, it needs comfort, it needs nurturing, it needs discipline, it needs structure, it needs routine. And that comes from knowing that you come home, dinner's going to be at such and such time. You get showered before. And you know what? I say this to you because I've worked with some kids that have never even got a hot meal within a week.
Wow.
Some kids that don't even have pajamas to sleep in. When I used to work in the youth sector, there were kids that would go to sleep in just the jeans that they had on that day.
Wow.
There was no pajama.
Yeah.
They didn't even know about having a bath before bed. What are you talking about having a
Really?
Yeah. And you know what? You'd see those kids go through the systems and then become perpetrators. And that was because of neglect and vulnerability and so on. So when you look at raising children within today's society, it's really, really important that it's a joint partnership between a mother and a father. And the reason why I say that is because I could never get away with anything. If I went to my mum and she said no, and I tried going to my dad and he'd be like, what did your mum say?
Yeah.
And I'd be like, she said no. He said, well, that's it, a no.
Yeah.
If I tried going to my dad and saying, oh, mum, dad said I can have it, she'd be like, no, I don't think so. Let me speak to your dad first. I always saw unity.
Yeah.
So we knew that we couldn't play off the two against each other. I always saw a family meal, as in we all sat together and ate. I always saw breakfast, lunch, dinner. I always saw, my dad taking interest in our after school activities, my mum taking interest in our, and so on. At that time, there wasn't even central heating, and I remember my mum putting our clothes on like a grill thing near the fire to warm them up before we'd wake up.
Yeah.
We'd have a shower before we would go to school. We would then come back before we went to bed. We had a shower. So that nurturing side of it makes you feel content, makes you feel calm, makes you feel loved, makes you feel wanted. But imagine some of these kids, they're not coming home to parents being at home, or a hot meal, or, mum in a good mood or dad in a good mood, or worrying about bills and so on and so forth. So I feel like when you talked about the feminism, and we're looking at femininity and masculinity, it's really interesting that we need to look at, some women feel that, it's hard to be in their feminine because they've had to be in the masculine for so long to protect and provide for their children and so on. So how about we look at men being in their masculinity and women being in their feminine side, and, we can grow and develop together.
Yeah. That is a very good point. And I also feel for those people who don't get the parents that they should have, because every child should have the love and the nurture of a parent. And a lot of children take it for granted when they do get that love and nurture, and the parents make them hot meals and they ask and they are interested in what the child is doing on a regular basis. I know myself, like when my mom asks me, oh, what are you doing in uni all the time? And I don't really have an answer because it's really difficult to explain to a South Asian mom who has come from Pakistan and doesn't know that I am a women's officer, or that what I do as a law student, it affects how my career is going to develop.
Asks you.
But she does ask me, yeah.
And that's a really good thing. And I always say, if they ask you, they've got an interest.
Yeah.
But imagine if they'd never asked you.
Yeah.
And how would you feel that my parents don't even ask me? And I know what you're saying, because it's a different generation, isn't it? And my mum doesn't speak English. She can speak basic English. She drives, and everyone finds that very strange.
So does mine.
Yeah. And I feel like my dad said to her that one thing I want you to do is have that independence, you know, that you can drive and you can have your own car and so on and so forth. However, my mum still shows an interest in what I do just as much as my dad does, even though my dad speaks English and so on and so forth. And even my granddad, God rest his soul. But I feel I know where you're coming from, but imagine coming home and no one asks you how you are, and how your day's been, and there was many homes. I used to manage hostels with young people staying in there. There was times when young people had got arrested for an ample amount of drugs, and I had to go do home visits. There was times when I was working with 8 to 13s around drugs awareness, and people were shocked how much these kids knew. But then there was young, vulnerable girls and boys that were being exploited, and I was working on those. And I remember my mum used to say to me, what time does your work finish? Because you're not coming home sometimes till 10, 11 at night. And I said to my mum, once my young people are safe, my girls especially are not on the streets selling themselves, then I'm okay to come home. I need to make sure that my girls are safe inside their rooms before I go to my safe space. And it was really hard trying to explain. And I remember when people would ask my mum, what does your daughter actually do? She goes, oh, she helps naughty kids. And she just see it as naughty kids. But what she didn't realize is these were the young people that made my career more insightful. But then it was like still trying to explain to everyone, like, what is it that you actually do? Was the difficult one. And I always say to them, I empower and develop young people. However, sometimes I got to deal with the young people who are in antisocial behaviour, crime, child sex exploitation, and drugs and gang culture and so on. So I understand where you're coming from. I think what we need to look at is as any individual, whether you're a mother, you're a father, you're a woman, you're a man, whatever, you need to be present. And I feel like when we talk about women, and so many mothers have said to me they've lost themselves in the process. So many women lose themselves in the process of motherhood, or in careers as well. And people will say, oh, you've got it brilliant. And you're like, well, no, it's different. You know, everyone's different in that sense. But I feel when we look at the whole femininity and masculinity, we need to always remember that there is a role for men within society, within homes. And there are amazing men out there that empower. I've got a friend, I'll be honest with you. He's an amazing guy. And, you know, whenever I've got like, you know, I want to bounce ideas from it, and I'll say, can I just have a quick conversation with you? And he'll be like, yeah, go on. And I'll say to him, what do you think about this? And he'll know that a strong statement is coming around some feminist movement kind of view or ideology. And I'll say to him, what do you think? And he'll be like, do you know what, Soph? That's actually quite a good point you made. However, he may counteract it. And he may counteract it and actually said, well, Soph, have you looked at it from this perspective? And I'm like, actually, I didn't look at it from that perspective. And he'll always say to me, but I think what you're saying is a good point. However, do keep this in mind. And I think if we have those individuals there that have that tone and approach, where you have the sounding boards, and he's such a good sounding board. And sometimes I'll call him and I'll be like, right, I've got this idea, and I just want you to run through this presentation. What do you think? I'm going to go through my speech. Tell me what you think. And for a male, he supports me. He values what I say and he respects what I say. And I think then that empowers me to continue going further. And that comes from not just my friend, my father, my brothers, you know, a good set of males. However, women are only as good as their surroundings. So we need to, like, for instance, women on women. You know, we need to really empower women upon women. I work with some fantastic women up and down the country. And I always say, you don't know her story. Let her have the limelight.
Yeah.
Let her have that moment, because she has worked so hard for that, and let her embrace it. And it's okay to sit back and clap,
Yeah.
because that is true empowerment.
Mhm.
And I always believe that's another area that we have to look at. And you know, even down to women advising women, it's like, you know, let's grow together. You don't need to criticize each other. Oh, I can't believe she did that. Or I can't believe she worked with, you know, she was this way inclined and so on. No. How about we lift and evolve each other? And I'm not joking. I'm so proud of so many of I'll call them my soul sisters, because they come from all ethnicities,
Yeah.
not just South Asian. They come from all ethnicities. And I have an honor. It's my honor to sit amongst those women, not their honor to sit with me.
Yeah.
Even though they'll say that to me all the time, I will say it's my honor to sit with you,
Yeah.
because you're sitting with like-minded individuals. And I always say, Gomal, is that, and I said this to you earlier, for a young woman, you earned this position. You campaigned, you put yourself out there, you got this position. So a round of applause to that. It wasn't given to you.
Yeah.
So when we look at acknowledging other women, we should turn around and say, do you know what, Gomal, well done you. As a young South Asian girl, it's not easy to campaign. You know, the way people are very opinionated these days and so on. It's quite scary, but you did it. And I always say, if she's earned a seat around that table, let her have that seat. Don't try taking it from her, and don't try devaluing her, because she's earned that seat at the table. But at the same time, we need to create seats at the tables for mothers, for single women, for divorced women, for women, you know, who are co-wives, whatever it may be. We need to create more spaces around the table for all kinds of women, because that's how we become a stronger network. And that's what's really important to me.
Yeah. Wow. That's a lot. So I want to touch back onto the topic of the fact that there are good men out there, because I feel like this is a very important point, and I want to know, how do we bring men into the conversation without making them feel sidelined or blamed, or like they're causing a problem in society?
Okay. First and foremost, let's look at the psychology of this, okay? So I'm going to take you a bit backward now. So you said, how do we bring them into the equation without thinking they're a problem?
Yeah.
Why do we think men are a problem?
Modern feminism.
Okay, elaborate to me on that one.
So a lot of women think that it's the men that we need to eradicate, essentially. And so my question is surrounding, how do we make them feel like they're not the problem? They're not, because a lot of men will be kind of targeted in conversations with, especially younger women, younger girls who are like, oh, this boy did this and this boy did that. And I don't like any boys because this boy did that. So it's because of one person. And so they've kind of held a grudge almost against all men. How do we make that not the case anymore?
Yeah. So if we look at the psychology behind that, and we look at the way we question things, so how do we make a society that's inclusive for men?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's put it in that way. But when we look at inclusiveness, we do look at women, because women, again, are disadvantaged in many factors. When we look at sexual harassment, women are, again, the higher proportion of victims than men are. When we look at sexual violence, women are obviously higher than men are, and so on. What we need to do is we need to go back to how we raise our boys. And that's where it stems from. So when I said to you, let me take it back, I'm taking it back to childhood.
Yeah.
What do we do when young boys are growing up? Don't cry. Be a man about it. You know, you need to man up.
Yeah.
Okay. So what we do is automatically we remove the emotions from a man, emotional intelligence, which is what is required later on in society.
Yeah.
And then when he gets older and he sees women, he thinks it's okay to speak a certain way to women.
Yeah.
However, if that behavior was called out at a young age, i.e., let's just say there's families that I've worked with, right, where boys have walked into the house, they're boisterous, they're offensive, they're aggressive, and the mothers allow.
Yeah.
So they'll call their sisters anything under the sun, girls or anything under the sun, that's unacceptable. Okay. That's where I turn around and say, we need to step up the game for women and women need to speak out. However, we need to have the mothers call that behavior out at a young age.
Yeah.
In my household, that behavior is not tolerated. You respect your sister, but then what you do, and I'm going to say this to you, when the girls are just as bad as the boys.
Yeah.
And I'm talking specifically right now about the South Asian community, right? So imagine, a guy says something to a girl, which he shouldn't do.
Yeah.
The girl then swears at his mom, his dad, his so-and-so, and so on and so forth. Then you've got two wrongs here.
Mm-hmm.
So then that makes you think, how was she raised and how was he raised? So then let's just say a young girl who comes from a very respectable household is spoken to that way. And she's like, oh my God, all men are the same, etc. You can only go on your experience.
Yeah.
And because you've had that experience does not mean all men are going to be like that. But unfortunately, a percentage of males are like that. And they think it's okay to disrespect women. It's okay to be violent towards women. It's okay to minimize the value of women within society. That's wrong.
Yeah.
And so we need to strip it back to how we're raising our sons, how our fathers calling this behavior out.
Yeah.
I know in my household, my dad would never allow my brothers to speak to me like that.
Mm-hmm.
There wouldn't be any swearing. There would not be any derogative language.
Wow.
There would be nothing. And I think that's because I was raised in a household of deen, as in religion, as opposed to culture. So when you dissect this whole element of boys having respect for women, boys having respect for girls, girls having respect for boys, as they get older into transition, adulthood, what does their family households look like, this, that, whatever. We need to realize is that what values are we instilling? And are they cultural values or are they religious values? Or are they just ethically, morally right?
Yeah.
And I always say, okay, if you don't want to bring the religion into it, ethics, morals and values, what are those?
Yeah.
So then a young girl is going to grow up and she's going to be like, I don't want to be with a man. So she'll go hyper independent and she'll raise, she'll get a good job. She'll be driving a nice car. She'll be, have a well-established job and so on. And then having a family may be like, if it happens, it happens. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. But that doesn't mean that, we look at it as in, that's it. You just live your life as a single woman kind of thing. And I'll give you an example. You said earlier on, you either be a career woman or you're married and you have children. Why is it that girls can't see that you can grow with a man? A man can grow with a woman.
Yeah.
Why do we have to say, okay, once I'm established, then I will consider it? And I always say to people, you never know which part of journey you're going to meet somebody.
Yeah.
It could be when you're very well established, or it could be when you've just newly graduated. You just don't know. But what's really, really important is the mindset of those individuals.
Yeah.
So if his mindset is positive and he's trying and he's doing his best and he acknowledges his faults, then surely you should be doing the same.
Yeah.
You should be looking, am I acknowledging my faults? Am I trying my best? Am I doing this? And that way we wouldn't have a fight between one or the other.
Yeah. And it shouldn't be like that.
Within the feminism movement, obviously there's other elements of inequalities.
Yeah.
And women's inequalities are still very prevalent. And we cannot ignore those. And we have to be very vigilant on those. Like when I teach around misogyny within the workplace, and I always pose a question to my male attendees. I said, do you know when you get up in the morning, do you have to worry about what you wear, what it looks like? If you wear high heels, what will people think? If you wear a certain color lipstick, or if you wear a perfume, or if you have your hair done. I'm like, no, so if we just get on a suit or whatever we're getting and we just get out. I said, do you know, there's so many things that go through a woman's mind, because even if she wants to make an effort and she wants to go to work just looking nice, wearing a pair of heels and like a lipstick, people will be like, what was she trying to do?
Yeah, who is she trying to impress?
Who is she trying to impress? Or she laughed a bit too much. She was enticing. No, she wasn't. She was just being herself.
Yeah.
Oh, she wore them heels to attract that attention. No, she didn't. She wore it for herself. And I feel like then what happens is that you look at women as an object.
Yeah.
And then I'm very big about making sure that we don't look at women as, we don't objectify women.
Yeah. that is a very big topic. So we've done the portion of discussion, and now I have a few questions just for you personally. So one of the biggest questions that popped into my mind was, what would you say to a young person, a young woman today who feels torn between being ambitious and being family focused?
I like that question, Como, because there shouldn't be "and" in there.
Yeah.
I'm just going to leave that food for thought for you, because she can be both.
Yeah.
She shouldn't feel torn, because if she meets the right person and her family, and I said this to somebody the other day, and she said to me, I want to take opportunities out of Bradford, but I'm worried what my parents will say. And I said, sit your parents down and explain your ambitions and tell them what you want to achieve. And I understand that there's the community's expectations, but there's your expectation. So what I would say to a young woman is, you don't have to choose between a career and building a family. You can have a career and build a family at the same time.
Yeah.
Do not elevate one over the other, because having a family is beautiful, and having a career is beautiful. And I think when the right people are in your life, you can have both.
Yeah. Okay, so the next question is, how can workplaces and communities better support women who want to do both? So they want a career and they want a family, or who choose one over the other.
It's really good that you said that, because at the moment, one of the things that I'm working on within organisations is that the workplace is still not inclusive for mothers.
Yeah.
We still don't have crash facilities at some workplaces. We don't acknowledge miscarriages. There's so much that workplaces need to do, even down to how we advertise jobs. Mothers will look at jobs that will be accessible for when they've got kids. So why would they then go to senior position jobs that are not accessible for them? So I've said to a lot of organizations, and I'm working on this with a lot of organizations, is how we're supporting women transitioning into motherhood as career women. And I say this because I remember when I was doing some maternity and paternity rights training, and the women said that they felt more comfortable telling their male colleagues that they were going on maternity leave than some of their female colleagues. And some female colleagues were like, oh, we're going to have to pick up the work.
Yeah.
And then obviously some organizations are just like, oh God, we're going to have to pay mat leave and so on and so forth. And they would then prefer to hire a male, because then they wouldn't be in that situation. So I think we need to be more open within organizations to say that, we are a workforce that welcomes mothers, women of all backgrounds. Because you've got to also remember, there are women who have adopted children who are going through that whole fostering, and they're still mothers. So we need to make sure that we have those workforces that are inclusive, accessible, and transparent, and making sure that they are workforces where women feel they belong.
Yep.
And that is really important for me, because I don't want any women to be like, well, do you know what? I can't start a family because X, Y, Z. No, you can start a family, but your workplace should be more inclusive around that.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so I want to get your ideas on empowering future generations.
Okay.
So Empowering Minds does a lot of amazing work. You can find a lot of information on the website, and I wanted you to tell me a bit more about what your organization specifically is doing to raise the next generation of confident, respected young women and men.
So I've been in the sector 24 years, and before I used to work with a lot of young people and a lot of young males and females. And I remember clearly one day, one of the young people that I'd worked with, who's now probably about, I'd say 32, 34 years old. And I said to him, he had an encounter with a young girl, a young female, and they were both about 16 at the time, and he swore at her and she swore back.
Oh.
And I said, you know what, you never speak to a young woman like that ever again. And I said it to her, you never speak to her. And till today, he reminds me of that. He says, I'll never forget what you said to me, that you never speak to a young woman like that. So many years ago, I would go into educating the youth, the young people, the boys and the girls. Whereas now I look at a systemic change within workforce culture.
Okay.
So when people get older, I look at it as in how is that workforce going to be inclusive for ethnically diverse people, and how are they going to feel they belong within those organizations? What are their recruitment processes like? What are their retentions like? What are their promotion opportunities like, and so on? So that's what I work on now. And I think for us guys, I always say to the next generation that don't play the victim card. Understand who you are and what you bring to the table, and there will be challenges along the way, and that is okay. And it's about how you grow and develop from them challenges, and it's about how you address imposter syndrome and know what your value is.
Mm-hmm.
So when young people come to me and they say to me, well, Sophia, I'm really worried I'm not going to get this opportunity. And I said, okay, how have you prepared for it?
Yeah.
And trust me, it's been difficult, because a couple of years ago, I did a research piece on how ethnically diverse young people were not getting opportunities in certain positions. And there was a recruitment company, and they said, we have to use white British names on our signature because we know that people won't look into us. Young black girls were told not to wear their natural hair because it was unacceptable for society.
Yeah.
People not pronouncing names correctly. And I always say, if you can pronounce supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, you can learn to pronounce someone's name right.
Yep.
So I always say to people, there are going to be challenges just like any other person.
Yeah.
Right. And maybe you'll encounter a few more than other people because of ethnically diverse. And you may not, because systems are changing and we're growing. But just never give up.
Yeah.
I'd always say never give up on what you want to achieve, because, that's what makes you you.
Yeah. I like that. How important is representation and visibility for women in leadership, and how can we encourage more of it in places like Bradford?
Visibility is so key, because when you see visibility, what you see is someone that looks like you, sounds like you, behaves like you. So for me, it's about, you can have visibility, but at the same time, there needs to be that systems change within organizations, and those organizations need to have that in place when it comes to senior leadership. And I always say, if people don't see people like themselves there and present, then they're not going to feel like they belong in the institute. So when we look at, visibility for women in leadership, yes, we can have visibility, but that doesn't mean every woman's going to get into that position. And that means what we've got to then look at is, how do we encourage women to continue to do that? And that is down to sisterhood, value and respecting each other, and knowing that every female has a different expertise and a different place within that leadership position. And when you come together, you evolve and you grow.
Yep. And what is one piece of advice that you'd give to women navigating their place in today's society?
Stay authentic.
Yeah.
Stay authentic. Stay true to yourself. Know your worth. Know your value. And the reason why I say that, not in an arrogant way, and in a disrespectful way, but I feel that if you know your expertise and you know your worth and your value, you know your USP, which is your unique selling point. And I always say, stay true to your values and stay authentic. And trust me, you will evolve and grow, because people can see authenticity.
Yeah.
They can see realism, and just keep it real.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. Last question. How can listeners support your mission at Empowering Minds?
Drop me an email. Let's have a conversation. I'm always looking for inspirational people. I'm always looking to work with new networks. I think for me, it's really important to evolve and grow the next generation. I've done 24 years in the sector now. It's time to level up the next generation. And I'm always there to support and mentor people. And, for me, it's like I said, it's South Asian Heritage Month. I want to continue helping young South Asian girls evolve and grow, because someone believed in me. And I hope I can do the same and give back to our community.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Sophia.
Thank you, Cornwall.
And that's a wrap for today's episode. Remember, everyone has a role to play in shaping our society, and the journey doesn't stop here. Keep questioning, keep learning, and making a difference. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on Her Side of Campus.